Hey folks, welcome back. This is Mark Devine with the Unbeatable Mind podcast. So grateful that you could join us today. I know your time is valuable, and also there's literally 100 billion podcasts popping up these days, so you have a lot to choose from. The fact that you're listening to the Unbeatable Mind podcast is really, really cool. And I know for the longest time we've only had it available on iTunes, but now if you'd like to look at it other places, we have it available at Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and of course our website, unbeatablemmind.com/podcast, where if you go there, drop your name in our email, because we have a lot of cool things. Like one of the things we're going to talk about today, about a special promotion with this cool device that I have on my head, which is not a set of headphones. Actually, it is, but that's not the primary purpose, right? So I'm going to actually take this off in a second. But anyway, so check out the Unbeatable Mind podcast. Get your name on the email, and please rate it if you can, because that really helps other people find it. One last thing before I introduce our super cool guest. The Unbeatable Mind Summit is going to be held December 2nd through the 5th, or 1st through the 3rd, here in Carlsbad, California. We're already 50% of the way of being completely sold out. It's going to be an unbelievable event. It's 3 days of Unbeatable Mind training, a tribe connection, working on our front sight focus plan for 2018, and some really cool speakers. And also you'll be able to play around with some technology and some of the tools that we've been testing this year. So I'm excited to introduce my guest today from Northern California, Dr. Daniel Chao. Daniel, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Yeah, Daniel is we're going to get into his background and everything, but he's an MD and has an MS in neuroscience, so he's truly a brain doctor. Formerly worked for McKinsey and is now co-founder and CEO of Halo Neuroscience, which is this little doohickey. This is one of their products. It's pretty cool. We're going to talk about Halo, and we're going to talk about some of the cool things they're doing with the fitness and the military community. And Dan, thanks for making your way down here to do this.
Thanks for the opportunity.
It's really cool. So this thing is really cool. Now, the Halo, I don't want to get into the details right now, but for everyone who's listening, at the end of the show or in the show notes, I've tested this product myself, and it's wickedly cool, and it works. And we're going to be offering a program discount for you guys. We can get $125 off to check out the device. So that's my sales pitch. So wait to the end. I'll give you the promo code, or look in the show notes if you have to go and you're going to listen to this later, but you don't want to wait and you want to go check out the device. So now I get to take this off. Well, it's pretty comfortable though, actually. I like that.
All right.
So Dan, I'm dropping the notes. Tell us a little bit about, before we get into kind of your work with Halo, which is, I think going to be something that everyone's really interested in. Tell us about like your background, where you grew up, how you got interested in science and brain science and all that stuff.
All right. So how far back should I go?
You were born at an very early age.
Born immigrant parents.
Okay.
In LA. Grew up in Anaheim.
The Chinese background, or?
Yeah. Okay. My parents are both born in China and escaped the communists. They escaped the Cultural Revolution when they were really young, and they grew up in Taiwan, and then came here in 1968.
Okay.
So after the Civil Rights Act of 1965, that reversed. Not to get too deep into American history, but there was something called the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. So there were no Chinese immigrants that were allowed between 1882 and 1965.
Really?
Yeah. So
okay, we're gonna have to do a separate podcast on that. I'm kind of curious about that.
Post 1965, that's when you saw a lot of a wave of Asian immigration, and my parents came here to go to graduate school and live the American dream.
Outstanding.
Got married, had my sister.
And were they scientists too?
Yeah, so both of my parents are they're very technical. So my dad is an aerospace scientist. He worked to create the space shuttle as we know it.
Kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. Good for him.
Yeah, he worked for Boeing Corporation, and my mom was an accountant. So, English not being their first language, like technical jobs were good for them,
Right.
because you didn't really need to. You can communicate in numbers.
Right.
So yeah, I was fascinated by the brain since I was a child, and I built a long road of education to learn more about the brain. So I'm a medical doctor. I went to Stanford for medical school and got a master's in neuroscience from Stanford as well. And Mark, I still remember the day sitting in pharmacology class in medical school and learning about the different types of drugs that we have access to. And it didn't take me long to realize that drugs are really the miracle of modern medicine. So 100 years ago, you might have died of a foot infection, and today we don't even think about it. We take an antibiotic and it's gone.
Right.
Cholesterol, take a little pill every day and you're going to live longer. Same thing with blood pressure and these types of things. But then when you get to drugs for the brain, the wheels fall off.
Right.
And I couldn't help to think, like, there's got to be a better way. Like, for a lot of the drugs for the brain, the side effects are worse than the disease.
Still a huge industry, billions and billions of dollars.
Absolutely.
And it's messing people up. Yeah.
Multi-tens of billions of dollars go into drug sales for drugs that actually don't work that well.
Right.
So I started thinking, maybe electricity could be better medicine than...
The brain works on neurochemicals and electrical stimulation.
It's an electrical organ.
So
it's a computer circuit.
Yep. Interesting.
100%. So what if we spoke its language and used electricity to communicate to the brain?
Do you think the electrical stimulation precedes the neurochemical reaction, which is what the drugs were trying to affect?
Yeah, the way drugs work, it just sort of modulates neural activity.
Right, I see.
And they work on these different receptor channels and this type of thing to modulate brain activity. But the problem with a drug is that it doesn't know where to go.
So it's going to affect everything. Yeah.
It's going to affect everything.
Shut some things down and open other things up that it has no intention.
Yeah, it doesn't know that we only need to go to this part of your brain.
Right.
It goes all over the place. And that's why there's a lot of friendly fire when we're talking about drugs for the brain. Whereas if we use electricity, like, we can put the electrode wherever we want.
It's just going to stimulate that part of the brain.
Exactly. And another great thing about electricity is something called the circuit. We can turn it off whenever we want.
Right.
We can turn it on whenever. Like with a drug, how do you turn it off and on? Right. It's about the blood clearing it and the liver metabolizing it. And if you're having a bad day on the drug, you're kind of stuck with it. There's no antidote. Right. So, what started as an idea in medical school led to a company.
Okay. So did you ever go and practice medicine? Like as a brain doc?
No. So, boy, all right. So we're getting in here. So I went to Stanford in this special program where you get an MD and a PhD.
I see.
Usually takes 7 or 8 years. It's called the MSTP, Medical Scientist Training Program.
Interesting. So you never intended to be a practicing doctor, but
Correct.
you needed the MD to be a scientist in the medical profession.
Exactly, right?
Got it.
The MD was just to inform my research so that it can be very targeted towards human health.
Most of the Unbeatable Mind listeners speaking have MD, PhDs, MBAs. I'm just joking.
I heard your listenership is
they are
is pretty
very
smart.
intelligent. Yeah. But getting an MD, PhD is a little bit unusual, I got to admit.
Yeah, so at Stanford, it's just a very weird place to go to school. I think most people know about it now, but
were there like 2 people in your program?
6. So it's
and 2 graduated probably, right? It's like SEAL training. No, did everyone get through?
Everyone got through.
Okay, good for that.
They're very nurturing there versus. Stanford is an academic institution that is tied to industry like no other university that I've ever been a part of.
Really interesting.
Like, this is known today, but it was true back then when I was at school. And I couldn't help but to learn about startups and businesses, and I became really interested and quickly learned that a startup is a better vehicle for my life dreams and my professional goals than a lab.
Right.
I could do practical applied research and actually take it further. Right. There's this translational step of taking it from a lab into practice that I was really interested in. So, so I imagine they have access to advisors and funding, and you could actually probably come out of that program with a operating company, or at least a research-based company with funding. Absolutely.
That's cool.
Like for me, there was a step in between, but absolutely. I mean, there's venture capitalists right across the street.
Right.
There's advisors and this kind of thing that you have access to, like uniquely at Stanford. So, yeah, at some point I realized that the lab wasn't for me. A startup was better. So I dropped out of the PhD program, which is why I only have a master's.
Got it. Okay.
And I finished out the MD.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that like what started as an idea led to, I joined at the time, it was a very small startup called Neuropace.
Mm-hmm.
And there we, it was a big effort, it was like a 10-year effort to develop what's like a pacemaker for your brain to treat epilepsy.
Oh, cool.
So this is a medical implant with electrodes going into the brain and basically an embedded computer in the skull with its own battery, its own computer chip, its own software.
So the computer chip senses epileptic seizures coming on and then will stimulate it to try to ward it off, or?
That's exactly right.
That's cool.
Yeah, so we have this onboard computer that's like that's sensing the brain and looking for signals that are suggestive of a seizure about to happen.
Right.
So let's get ahead of the problem.
EEG or what's the? Okay.
Yeah, so it's a different form of EEG. So EEG is traditionally thought of as a scalp electrode, but now we have electrodes in the brain. So it's really privileged access, right?
And epilepsy happens in a certain area of the brain, like it's not one area for one person, another area for another person.
Yeah, so it can happen. It could start from anywhere.
Okay.
But there are some hotspots. So like the hippocampus and the temporal lobe are hotspots for the genesis of seizures. So,
okay, and since I know nothing about, well, I know a little bit about this, but not much. If let's say the hippocampus sends a signal out that is pre-epileptic, does that signal radiate through the entire gray matter of the brain, or just is it localized?
So sometimes it's localized, and that's good for the patient.
Yes. Okay.
It could still lead to a seizure, but if it's localized, it's a less severe form of the seizure. There are other seizures where what starts as a local short circuit spreads more broadly across the brain. And here's where you see
like one wave will trigger a different wave.
Correct. And this is like, I think people have in different ways have seen this happen in other individuals where they're on the ground and this kind of thing and lose consciousness. So it could be localized or it could spread.
Okay. So this device, was it successful?
Yeah. So a lot of clinical testing, a lot of engineering and development, but we got it to the finish line. So we had our big day in front of the FDA, and they voted 13-0 for approval.
No kidding.
So
is that pretty rare?
It's extremely rare.
Really?
So a vote at that level, unanimous fashion, hasn't happened in decades.
Really? Okay.
So we're really proud of that, and it's out there in clinical practice, Mark.
Is it?
Yeah. So I don't think people realize that 1% of the world is epilepsy.
Huh. That's a lot of people.
Yeah, and it's a disease of the young.
Right.
So we're helping young people get their life back. We're helping young people like get their driver's license back, get back to college, get a job.
And before this, or someone without this treatment, what was available to treat epilepsy, if anything?
Yeah, so there's the mainstay of therapy is drugs.
Right.
And for a third of people with epilepsy, drugs don't work.
Okay.
So it's complete failure of medications. And there's another third of people who take the drug and it works, but they would actually rather have seizures than the side effects of the drug.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. So
it still debilitates them. They can't have a normal life.
So effectively, they can't use the drug because the side effects are so bad. So yeah, it's I guess this whole conversation is just to really kind of like introduce this concept of using electricity as medicine, right? Like, and I know, especially in this country, there's some baggage around using electricity with the brain.
Yeah. Well, the first attempt at it was rather intrusive, right?
Yeah.
Literally a frontal lobotomy with electricity.
So that's surgery, and then we used ECT inappropriately.
Yeah, interesting.
We almost used it as a form of punishment, and there was a movie that memorialized that, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Right.
So yeah, I know what might sound like as a crazy concept, especially with the baggage that electricity in the brain comes with. I would really love to appeal to you and your listenership that we've come a long way since those early days. We could do a lot better in using more refined forms of electricity to our advantage.
Yeah. Well, most of the listeners heard an earlier podcast I did about 6 months ago with Dr. Andrew Hill from Peak Brain.
Yeah.
Do you know Dr. Andrew Hill and his work? Yeah. So he's using electricity in a neurofeedback way for performance, but also has some evidence that the stimulation and the training of the brain, right, getting the brain into a certain pattern, alpha beta pattern, will help heal people from like the extreme ends of behavior, ADD and OCD, right, can bring that back into norm. Also, he makes claims that we can find dramatic improvements in extreme alcoholics and as well as other neurological disorders. So that's kind of interesting. What do you think about that work?
Yeah, so that I think it has a lot of promise, especially with these new biofeedback systems.
Right.
They're so much easier to use.
Right.
Just about anybody can buy a decent biofeedback system and use their phone to do biofeedback.
Yeah, pretty much what he said. Yeah, so he was going to set me up. I haven't done it yet, but set me up. And it was a little more elaborate than a phone. It hasn't been condensed into an app yet. That's a huge opportunity for an entrepreneur to be able to take neurofeedback and do what you've done kind of with a halo for the movement, right? So we're going to get into that. But for him, it was a $4,000, computer with essentially a game where you would fly a jet with your mind. And the point was you weren't actively flying the jet, you were passively flying it by trying to get your brain into a perfect, state of mental electrical activity. It's very interesting.
Yeah, so now you can gamify it, right? Instead of just looking at squiggly lines, you can take that squiggly line and put it into a video game engine so that it's more entertaining, right? And it's stickier that way. It's, it's good. It's all going in the right direction.
Right.
So actually, in contrast to biofeedback, what we're doing with neurostimulation is actually the reverse.
Is it? Okay.
Right. So we're not sensing the brain. We're actually delivering energy to the brain.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, I did not pick that up. So the Dr. Hill neurofeedback is passive. It's pulling information out and then feeding back that information through your cognitive senses, eyesight, audio, and then you're making intentional adjustments.
Exactly.
Which is different. So what you're saying is you're actually like, I wore the halo and I felt it. When I put it on, it was a tingling sensation. And then all of a sudden I went catatonic. I'm just kidding. I turned back into the cyborg. Sometimes I make jokes. I turned into literally a cyborg. And I was a cyborg at one point in my life in the SEAL teams. But the workout I did and the experience I had was just like everything kind of clicked in and I was able to perform at a really high level. And I didn't know if I was just having a good day or if it was a result of the device, because normally it takes some time to have its effect, right? So,
yeah. So usually it takes a little bit of time, and especially for people that are highly trained like yourself and do a lot of, you've been training every day of your life for multiple years now. Right. So usually for highly trained individuals, we need a little bit more time. But what you just said is not unusual.
It's not.
Okay. Yeah. So,
so I kind of jumped forward, but you went from the electrical stim to heal epilepsy, or not epilepsy, epilepsy.
Yeah.
To how did you then transition that into performance with the halo?
Yeah.
concept?
So. My last company is called NeuroPace, and that's where we made the implantable neurostimulator for epilepsy. My now co-founder, Brett Wingeier, we were together at NeuroPace for a long time, and we really felt like the holy grail for this field of neurostimulation was to do it non-invasively.
Right.
So, what is appropriate for someone with severe epilepsy to get 3 hours of neurosurgery, to have electrodes and pulse generators installed into their brain. Sure, that if you have a disease that severe, that might be appropriate for you. But for the rest of us, it's not. So we really thought that if we could take some of the principles of using electricity, interacting with the brain to augment its capabilities, if we can do it without surgery, not only can we help people with medical conditions, but maybe we can help just regular, healthy people without disease get more out of their brain. And what we found in the literature was exactly that. So there was this way to stimulate the brain using this technology called TDCS, so transcranial direct current stimulation.
Okay.
So we first started reading papers back in 2005, 2006, and there were only like 10 papers in the whole world. And then slowly, year over year, we saw this body of literature just take off. So we went from 10 papers to 2,000 papers in 10 years.
Really? So
Yeah.
these are students and scientists who are doing this stuff in the laboratory.
Correct. Yeah.
But there wasn't any real commercially viable products at the time.
Yeah, and they're using scientific equipment.
Right.
Boxes with dials and switches, cost tens of thousands of dollars and takes a real expert to assemble onto a test subject.
Right.
We saw an opportunity to build it far simpler. Same capabilities, same level of engineering and safety features. But like, what if we could build this into something that just about anybody could use, pair it with an app on your phone? Now we're basically unlocking a technology that's been proving in a lab and bringing it out into the world.
Yeah. So when did you start this process with Halo? How long
So
you been
it
at it?
depends on when you start the clock. Let's roll it back. So about 2012, 2013,
Okay.
we started building prototypes in our free time after work
Okay.
and testing ourselves and then testing our friends.
So you did this completely outside of Neuroscape.
Yeah. So we were able to replicate some of the published work with our little prototypes on ourselves and on our friends. So then we started to really think, all right, this technology has got some legs. We raised some money, as you do in Silicon Valley,
Right.
quit our jobs, and we started Halo in 2014.
Okay. Wow, that's not too long ago in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah. So, what started with some like basic testing, like using ourselves as guinea pigs, led to we raised a little bit of money to get started, get some office space and to pay ourselves a little bit to keep the lights on. And fast forward to today, we've got about 25 employees and we've got Halo Sport launched.
Yeah. So just so the listeners can get a sense of where this is going, you've got some professional sports teams using it. The Navy SEALs have gone through testing and are adopting, it in some capacity. A lot of CrossFit athletes and some real, top tier CrossFit Games athletes are using it. So you've already got adoption by, a validation crowd. And so now your challenge is to get exposure and to, get it into the hands of more people who could benefit from it. Sounds like.
Yeah. So we don't see this as a tool just for elite competitive athletes. We want to see all athletes, amateur athletes using this. I have a day job, but I really love the athletic side of my life. And I use Halo Sport so that I can perform at a higher level. And that makes me feel better, more complete as a human. Keeps me alive, keeps me balanced. So yeah, I really see the win for this company is not when just elite athletes use it, but when everybody uses it.
I think I read somewhere, or I was talking to Steve, who runs the Unbeatable Mind company for me. He took it and borrowed it to use it for his musical, his musical performance. And he said that there was some evidence that some piano players have found it to be effective because it's the movement area of your brain, moving the fingers. It's a little bit more subtle than picking up a barbell, but it's not that different. And so it can be used by not just athletes, right? So
so maybe we could take a step back and talk about what the neurostimulation is doing.
Yeah.
So if your listeners aren't watching, Mark had the Halo Sport headset on like a regular set of headphones.
Right.
There's some special pieces built in the underside of the arch.
These are the stims, huh?
We call them primers, but effectively they're electrodes. And that is what emits an electric field that interacts with this special part of your brain called the motor cortex.
Okay.
So the motor cortex controls movement in our bodies.
The motor cortex is in the midbrain?
It's not in the midbrain, but it's in the middle of your brain. So the midbrain is actually a deeper structure.
Right.
So this is still pretty superficial.
Still in the neocortex.
Yeah, still in the neocortex, just right above your ears.
Got it.
20 minutes of neurostimulation will induce a temporary state of hyperlearning. So in this case, in your motor cortex.
I see. Movement.
Yeah. So now what
It's
we
not
want
going
to
to
do,
help you learn mathematics or memorize a
unfortunately,
language.
No, unfortunately, this is purely for movement. But
Right.
let's think about movement broadly, right? Like when people think about movement, they naturally think about elite athletes. But we define athleticism and athletes much more broadly than just baseball players and football players. So you mentioned musicians. So we view musicians as athletes. So not the creative or emotional side of what
Right.
they need to do, but the technical side. So think about a guitarist
Right.
and what their left hand needs to do,
Right.
or a violinist or a pianist, both hands, or a drummer.
Imagine this extends to artists as well,
Yeah.
painters and
We have artists buying this, and like we've even called them to say, hey, listen, this is not going to help you with the creative aspects, but they're like, yeah, I just want to move a brush across canvas
more gracefully.
more gracefully, like perfect.
Interesting. Okay. So there's one thing that Dr. Hill said that I wanted to ask you about because it was intriguing. Because I asked him about the halo, and I wasn't clear on the stimulation versus the passive receptivity, but he said something about one of the challenges or one of the things to be thoughtful of when using neurostim is that there is some evidence that it can recruit neuroplasticity from other areas of your brain. Does that statement make sense to you?
Yeah,
I'm not sure exactly what he means.
Yeah, so I used a word, hyperlearning.
Okay.
And that is, it's an easier to understand word, but let's use the word neuroplasticity because that's actually more accurate.
Okay.
So neuroplasticity is the process by which our brain can create new circuits.
Right.
And this is how we learn and remember stuff, like movements and otherwise, math, presidents' names. All of that is encoded in a circuit. And neuroplasticity is how we build these circuits. It's the process by which we do that. Now, neuroplasticity is most active when we're young.
Right.
And it begins to decline in our mid-teens. It never goes to zero. So you can teach an old dog new tricks. That's absolutely true. It doesn't matter how old you get. You still have a plastic brain. You could still learn.
But your ability to do that diminishes or slows down or changes over
right.
time.
And that's part of natural aging,
Right.
which sucks.
Yeah.
But yeah, what we can do with neurostimulation is we can induce these temporary states of hyperplasticity.
I see.
So I use the easier to understand word hyperlearning, but really what it is a temporary state of hyperplasticity.
Yeah, we're bringing it back alive again.
Right.
Like your learning capacity comes back online a little bit.
Right.
Now, here's a question, though. I think what Dr. Hill was alluding to was that if you do that in the movement area, you might be recruiting potential neuroplasticity from other learning areas.
Yeah.
And so is it possible that this could make you a dumb jock?
So no.
We're all very relieved.
No, maybe we can make you a smarter jock, though.
All right, I'm all for that. Yeah.
So with our electrodes, and I think this is what Dr. Hill was getting at, our electrodes are, or we'll call them primers, are built a little bit wider than it needs to be. And this is to account for a small amount of natural variation in the way people put on headphones. So there's like a centimeter of leeway on either side that we provide you. So what that means is that when you put it on, you might be stimulating some neighboring structures of the motor cortex.
Okay.
And the neighboring structures are actually our friends and could actually help with movement. So on one side, it's primary sensory, and on the other side, it's premotor. So stimulation in these structures actually might help us. So yeah, we don't feel like it's a bad thing.
Here's another thing that's kind of running through my stimulated mind. With Unbeatable Mind, we try to experiment with multiple modalities of learning. And one of the reasons it's so effective is because we like to say, if you want to really learn something fast, then move your body while you're learning it. It's not it's like, like learning a new language while you're walking or something like that, or performing Tai Chi or a burpee. And so I can see how, learning a non-movement related thing while you're stimulating the movement area of your brain could actually accelerate.
We should try that.
I think we should try that. Test my theory. That's pretty interesting. And I wonder if that's why, the SEALs are using the product. right? You've been testing it at DevGru and other areas. How are they using it? What's the modality, or how are they testing it?
So it's it's as you can probably be sympathetic towards. It's I can't really talk too much about our work,
Sure.
but what started with some work with naval special warfare has led to a more significant work and more broad work across the military. So now we're working at the DoD level, not just with the Navy, but with multiple branches of the military, primarily in special ops, but across multiple branches of the military.
And at that obscure unit, the Defense Innovation Unit, Extreme Extrapolation Experimental, DIUX, right?
Yeah, so right.
Love
So
that acronym.
the funding agency is called DIUX, and it's a new acronym for.
It sounds a lot like InQtel, which is the CIA's venture fund.
Yeah, they are cousins of each other.
Are they? Okay. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So DIUX is Defense Innovation Unit Experimental.
Got it. Okay.
They have an office in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and one in Boston.
Okay.
And their mandate is to connect the military to new technologies that are being developed in the country, where the former, like the military proper, would be too slow to react to these new technologies.
Right.
So here's a new vehicle where they can incorporate newer technologies into their problem areas to help solve problems.
That's cool. So they've connected with you, or vice versa, and now we're testing this across the different branches of service.
Yeah. I'd actually say it goes beyond testing at this point.
Okay.
They're using it in practice, which
And
is
I guess my
awesome.
question is, I imagine it's still being used, or the first inclination is to use it to enhance physical movement performance, because that's what the design is.
Correct.
But one of the things we've been kind of dancing around, and what we were talking about earlier before we started, was the ability to use this tool to actually increase your skill level in an area that is not directly related, let's say, the actual performance itself, but you can increase your skill level in, let's say, how to do a movement pattern. Because if you're doing it improperly, then you have to unwind the neurological pathways or override those neurological pathways, right? So you don't just jump. Let's use running examples. We talked about running and rucking, right?
Yep.
You don't put the halo on, and it's not just going to make you a better rucker or runner. But if you put the halo on and then learn how to do it more efficiently, then that'll help grease the grooves, stimulate new pathways, and those will override the dysfunctional motor patterns. Am I right there?
Yeah. So, think about it as biomechanical reprogramming.
Okay, good.
Right. So, when you're talking about walking long distances under load, there's a way to walk that is more efficient than if you were bouncing up and down, walking left and right. Like, to the extent that you can walk in a straight line, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
You'll end up at your target area in better shape. And for your previous line of work, injury. That is everything, right?
Yeah. So I could see an infantry unit or the Rangers wanting to use this to make sure, for injury prevention and durability training, to make sure that the gait and the ruck, how the body is moving under load is the most efficient for the soldier, so that they survive that ruck to the target and can carry on with the mission.
Yeah. So, like, how can we use neurostimulation to help reprogram the brain such that you adapt to feedback, right? You adapt to instruction on how to walk more efficiently or run more efficiently. Yeah. That's definitely.
Is there any way to build this into a helmet?
Yeah, so there's we're in discussions with some helmet manufacturers.
Right on.
So the idea would be the Intel inside.
Right.
We would just be the neurostimulator inside.
Right. Now, and I can see for a more complex movement like shooting, right? So you're on the firing range and you first want to learn how to shoot expert with a 25-yard pistol. That we can go through the move with put the stim device on the halo and let it warm up your brain for 20 minutes while you're dry firing, and then while you're firing, and then the idea is that you'll be able to perform and achieve an expert rating much faster, probably.
Yeah, so shooting is a great application.
Yeah.
The movements required to properly handle a gun, position it, take down a target, all under duress, where time is limited. that takes a lifetime to learn. Hundreds and thousands of reps are required to get that perfect. And when you need it the most, you can't think about it.
I have a question that you may not be able to answer because it hasn't been tested yet, and it'd probably be very hard to test. But I'm imagining that a soldier or a SEAL could use the stim and visualize and still have the same effect or similar effect.
That makes a ton of sense.
Because doesn't it stimulate the motor function area as well?
Yeah. So motor visualization will light up your motor cortex like a Christmas tree if you're in an MRI scanner. So you're not moving, but you're thinking about moving.
Right.
The movement part of your brain is going crazy, which really begs the question, like, what if you just thought about movement and you had neurostimulation on? I think it'll work.
I think so too.
But there's no data to support what I just said. Right. It's just a hypothesis.
Yeah, so we're talking hypothetically speaking. Well, I would love to try that too. I don't know how the heck you would ever validate it, except for the same baselines, right? If I could, if my shooting expertise level was, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100 at an 80, and I used the halo stim and I visualized it and never picked up a weapon and then shot 100.
Yeah.
Then that would prove it. Yeah.
So I know, like, visualization's really it's a big thing in golf. And I know a lot of our pro golfers are using this as a visualization tool.
Okay. Right on.
Yeah, and especially with golf, there's only so many reps you can do a day. It's so repetitive. You can't put that kind of load on your body and expect to be healthy into your 40s. And so, how can you get some movement-free repetitions?
You just gave me a whole new lease on how I'm going to use this thing, because I explained earlier that my schedule, and we're all busy. Like the person who's listening to this, our Unbeatable Mind Tribe, are so busy that even getting to the gym and, it's like you got to be efficient and bam, 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 get in and out and move on to the next thing. And so what the challenge I had is I would pick the thing up and I'd have forgotten to charge it, or, I'm missing a part, or I can't, I don't have my phone with me, so the app is not there. And so I used it and then I couldn't use it, and then I used it and then I couldn't use it. But if I could use it on the airplane to visualize and know that I'm getting the same results.
Yeah.
I'm going to try that. In fact, I'm going to take it with me on my trip this weekend.
Mark, something that you said, I want to touch on is that, and that thing, that word efficiency really resonates with me.
Yeah.
So whether you are a working professional and still value the athletic side of yourself, or if you're a professional athlete and this is all you do, practice is precious. Right, practice puts load on the body.
Right,
it steals time from our day. Too much practice is bad.
Right,
risk of injury, fatigue.
Now, overtraining is a big issue with the SEAL Fit community, right? Because we love working out, but you do too much is not good.
So we see ourselves as an efficiency tool.
Right,
like with a given amount of practice, knowing that practice is limited, how can we maximize the gains? Now, like I think we've done some great job with the neck and below. With proper fueling and nutrition, with foam rolling and stretching and like light activation work to get the body prepared. Maybe the biggest part of this equation we're completely neglecting, and that's the brain. Right. Like how can we get the most neurologically from a training session? So that's where we come in.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. Let's talk about an application. One of the things that we love to do in our tribe is, we love CrossFit, and I know some CrossFit Games folks and a lot of CrossFitters are already using this with great effect. So it's been shown to improve their, even like the deadlift or some of their core lifts and the ability to move efficiently under load and that type of thing. So we know it'll work for that. And that was the application I was using it for, actually. They were short, high-intensity WODs, and it was effective. But I hadn't thought until we talked earlier about how it would be used for, let's say, a ruck. Now, we addressed that with the Army, but for those of us, like we're going to Greece in September. I mentioned we're going to go fight the Persians, so we're going to metaphorically attack the Western Empire again. We're going to...
Keyword there is metaphorically.
Yeah, metaphorically. All joking aside, we're going to retrace the trail that King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans took from Sparta to Thermopylae, the hot gates. And along the way, we're going to train. So we're going to train, do a SEAL Fit WOD every day. We're going to do some Unbeatable Mind training. And we're going to bring some vets who are suffering from PTSD over and get some corporate sponsors It's all very cool, but I can see how cool this would be to bring this along and integrate it into our training, right? Both before and after.
Mm-hmm.
And the before part would be, how do we, make sure that we can walk 300 kilometers and avoid injury? And so, correct me if I'm wrong, we would want to use the stim device and use it with some gait training, like a pose clinic, or someone who knew how to analyze my gait in terms of, rucking with 40 pounds on my back, and say, okay, you need to shift this a little bit, right? You need to land a little bit more on the ball of your foot. You need to not pick your legs up so high. You need to lean a little bit forward, because you're not doing those things, which is going to lead to inefficient rucking. And so I use the Halo device to do it in the new way, right?
While you're getting this expert instruction.
While I'm getting the expert instruction, and that's going to stimulate and create the new neurological pathway. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just like, what can we do to get more neurologically from a training session, right? Like, how can we help with this biomechanical reprogramming?
Right.
So that we can adopt a new skill or hone a skill that we already do pretty good and make it better. Yeah.
Okay. So that's one application. Can you think of any other applications for athletes who are like Spartan obstacle course racers, SEAL Fit, people training for Kokoro camp, or, those long, arduous, mentally demanding events?
Yeah. So there's, like, just continuing on this endurance application, there's, we had some athletes go to Rio who were training with Halo Sport, competed in the Olympics, and I think we got some medals that were unexpected in endurance sports.
Really? Okay.
So that really kind of piqued our interest. And, we went back to them. It's like, all right, how are you training with Halo Sport? And it kept coming back to interval training. So their races are much longer than the hour of hyperplasticity that we buy them.
Right.
So what they try to do is they condense, their race into an hour by doing really, really hard intervals. And, what I think neurologically is happening is that as you enter a really hard interval, you're just thinking about getting to the other side of this interval in the best shape possible, in the least amount of pain. And the way you do that is you figure out for yourself the most efficient pattern of movement.
Right.
So it encourages, it's a forcing function for you to be efficient.
Yeah, interesting.
And
you can't be lazy.
You can't be lazy in an interval,
right.
And if you are, you're going to suffer.
Right.
You're going to suffer from it. So, with interval training, there's, I think, absolutely from the neck and below, there's things that are happening, like tapping different metabolic stores and this kind of thing. But I would argue from the neck and above, from a neurologic standpoint, there's something really cool happening. Is that you're learning to be efficient. You're forcing yourself to be efficient. So I like, there's Ironman triathlete Tim O'Donnell. He won the Boulder Ironman. So this last about a week ago, he won by 20 minutes.
Wow. No kidding.
Yeah. So it's results like this that are that's just really heartening to see.
That's amazing.
And yeah, it's
that must have been a little disheartening for his competitors, his peers, who think they're putting out, and he's like, "Whoa, what are you eating out there?
Where is this guy?
Where is he?"
And then there's a big race this weekend. The Western, it's an ultra marathon.
Yeah, the Western 100 or something like that. It's 100 miles up through Durango, right? Is that the right one?
No, I think it's in the Sierra. So it starts in Auburn, I think, or in like our part of the world, Lake Tahoe area. But yeah, we'll have a couple athletes. Remains to be seen how well they do. So knock on wood, they do well.
That's cool. Very cool. So why only 20 minutes? Like, why wouldn't I want to use this for an hour?
Yeah. So we get this a lot because folks like you are thinking if 20 minutes is good,
be better, right?
20 minutes is good. Maybe 40 minutes is twice as good. So it turns out it isn't. Okay. And there's diminishing returns after 20 minutes.
Okay.
So 40 minutes doesn't buy you double the plasticity.
Are there any risks if you kept it on longer?
No, just wasting your time. There might be some skin irritation. So, through the app, we'll keep you honest.
It shuts you down.
It'll shut you down, right. We'll have a necessary lockout period.
Right.
I think it's 8 hours. It's set at 8 hours. So
You can't train for more than 8 hours.
well, you can. You just can't use neurostimulation.
Good point. That's awesome. Good for you. All right. I think the Halo. I'm excited to try it for visualization and have some of other SealFit athletes give it a whirl and probably use it for this 300-kilometer hike in Greece. That sounds pretty cool. We'd have to talk further about that. But Allison, who set up this podcast, mentioned to me you're working on something new, some super duper dodecaphonic secret product. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, we're known as a sports performance company because Halo Sports out there and it's mostly on athletes, but we actually think of ourselves as a human performance company. So we don't want to stop with just movement. We want to scale the technology, basically just move the electrode to target a different part of the brain.
Different learning areas.
Exactly, different learning areas. So same stimulation output, but different form factors so we can more easily target different parts of the brain. So, I'd love to just appeal to you and your listeners, think about your life and think about some of the things that you would want in your life, but you don't because it takes too long to learn. Like, Mark, what if you want to learn Italian?
Right.
And you tried, you had Duolingo on your phone and you tried for 10 days and you just weren't making the progress that kept you motivated. Like, what if we can change that?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what if we could throw an electrode over your language cortex and then you practice with Berlitz or Duolingo or any of the Rosetta Stone, and we made learning fast enough to keep you motivated to keep with it. Like, what if you want to learn to play piano?
Yeah.
But you don't even start today because you're just thinking, well, heck, it's going to take me 10 years.
Right.
And I just don't have the patience for that. But what if we could reel it in? I forgot who said that there's this 10,000 hour rule. Like, we really...
Malcolm Gladwell.
We want to bust that. You know, we want to reel that into like 2,000 hours.
That's interesting because I've been saying the same thing happens when you get yourself into a deep learning state through breathing, meditation, visualization exercise, which is the Unbeatable Mind Path. And I imagine, and that does work, right? It does accelerate learning. And the SEALs are using sensory deprivation. My friends Cotter and I forget the co-author wrote about that in Stealing Fire. So we're all about stacking different tools and techniques. So I can imagine how STIM combined with either sensory deprivation or meditation to get into an ideal learning state would almost accelerate the acceleration.
Yeah. So
now we're cool. Now we're getting somewhere.
I think there's a lot of opportunities to mix technologies.
Yeah.
I think.
What about social skills? Like when I was 18, I would love to have something like this to teach me how to meet girls.
Yeah, I'm in my mid 40s. I could still use that.
There's a motivation for you to invent this new device.
Yeah. So social skills, that. Honestly, I haven't thought of that, but yeah, maybe.
Maybe we just got to stimulate the emotional area of the brain. Does that even exist, or maybe it's a heart stimulant? I don't know. All right, we're going off track here, but probably could do that, I imagine. So, what about the medical applications for this product for the Halo?
Yeah. So, we've been talking about using this in healthy people for performance benefits, but as a doctor, a big part of why I'm doing this at Halo is to help people who really need it. So, people with disease. So, for Halo Sport, same principles of inducing the motor cortex into a temporary state of hyperlearning and then doing training. So instead of doing athletic training, what if we did physical therapy?
Right.
So 50% of people who have had a stroke have some sort of motor disability, like they can't walk or move their arm. Incredibly frustrating and debilitating for the stroke victim. Right. And especially in the chronic phase, their opportunity for improvement is very, very low. It's very tough, even with physical therapy. It's very, very tough to achieve gains. So, what if we can use neurostimulation to help raise the ceiling of what is possible, and also accelerate the rate that you can come to this new ceiling? So, yeah, we already have a clinical trial set up in South Carolina.
Okay, excellent.
And we're really looking forward to seeing those results.
Yeah. What about epilepsy, which was your original passion?
Yeah, so there's the problem with epilepsy is that could happen everywhere, like we talked about.
You can't
and it's
hard to localize it.
Yeah, it's hard to localize it. So it would be difficult for us to make that many neurostimulators to cover that many areas of the brain.
But what other diseases may it be effective for?
There's some really interesting data on impulse disorders.
Interesting.
So this is not motor cortex anymore. It's a different part of the brain, more frontal. So impulse disorders, think about addictive disorders, where you get this inappropriate reward response for a given stimulus.
Mm-hmm.
You could also throw obesity into that continuum.
Mm-hmm.
So you get an inappropriate reward stimulus from eating. Now remember, obesity is as much psychiatric as it is metabolic.
Right.
So there's ways where you can rebalance that equilibrium so that you get a more appropriate reward response.
Right. Which then helps them on the psychological level.
Exactly.
Because they're getting different feedback.
Right. It doesn't make you hunger for that reward as much as you did because it's more tempered.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So what's the prognosis on this, the new development?
Yeah, so you could expect our second product about this time next year.
Okay.
Yeah,
Excellent.
so we're already off to the races working on it.
Excellent.
We're excited about that one.
Yeah, sign us up to test it. I'm sure there's plenty of listeners who'd be all over that.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, that's exciting. Okay. How can so Halo, obviously just look you up online, but I wanted to let people know that if I mentioned it earlier, if you're interested in trying this product out, Dan has graciously offered a $125 discount on the product.
Yes.
And so you'd go to our website, right? Or go to Halo, go to their website, which is what?
HaloNeuro.com.
Halo Neuro, Neuro.com?
Correct.
Okay, and then when you check out, enter the promo code Unbeatable 125. Unbeatable 125. That's cool. I'm excited for that. Thank you very much. That's very generous.
It's my pleasure to do
generous.
this. Yeah. Huge fans of you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. Likewise. So keep up the good work. I can't wait to test this with visualization. Can't wait to see the new product. Good luck with the work with the SEALs. Of course, they're near and dear to my heart, and the rest of the military. So this is important. It's important to keep those guys physically and mentally healthy, and so we can do our mission in protecting the world.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate you joining
Thanks,
me
Mark.
today. All right, folks, that's it. Dr. Dan from Halo Neuroscience, really appreciate your time today. It was extremely interesting, and this podcast is available on video, which you'll be able to see it at the unbeatablemind.com website. Eventually, we're going to have a new YouTube channel so that we can have videos for all the podcasts, or at least most of them. And if you're just listening to an audio, then just imagine two really cool guys standing and talking to each other. That's about all you're going to get to see, and me goofing around with a Halo headset. That's it. So you didn't miss much. Anyways, thanks for being here. You guys rock. Really appreciate your support. And go check out Halo, and let's support these guys in their incredible mission. And I guess that's it. Train hard, stay focused, and we'll see you next time. Hoo-yah. Divine out. Hey, this is Mark Divine. Thanks very much for watching the Unbeatable Mind podcast on YouTube. You can also find the podcast at iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, and unbeatablemind.com/podcast. Be sure to check out the new episode released every week. Hoo-yah.